Okay, we'll take a look at how to assemble both a bolted stylus and a capacitive or passive conductive stylus, one that uses conductive filament. But first let's take a look at these measuring stars just to get a sense of how to use them. And on each star there's a number at the center, that's the base number, and then around the outside are several more numbers from 0 to 9. So this circle out here has a 0 at its base. The diameter of this circle is 20 plus 0, so this is a 20 millimeter diameter circle. This is 21 with a 1 at its base. For smaller fingers, smaller toes, there's another ring that has 10 as its base. But all you do to measure the diameter of a finger or a toe is you just try to get it in the hole, and if there's resistance to get it over this knuckle, the last knuckle, you'll just keep trying a bigger size until it kind of gets over okay, but you want it to get smoothly over that knuckle. So, and all the way in here. You don't want it to be just barely fitting, and then after someone's worn the stylus for a while, you have a hard time getting it off. So it should clear that knuckle real cleanly. And so for my index finger, this is a good choice of ring, and that's a 23. So the ring for this finger would be a 23 millimeter diameter ring. Okay, so let's take a look at assembling a bolted stylus, and in this case it's going to sit on these two fingers in this kind of position and come out the underside of my hand. The stylus itself is going to attach to a ring that's on my little finger, so it actually will have the smaller of the rings. But the first thing we'll do is, first thing we can do is put these two together. And this larger opening here, this larger base, is for the stylus. The smaller one is for this finger ring here. And we just begin by kind of pushing the two together. And you might, depending on your printer, it might slide in very easily or it might be a little tough. If it's a little tough, that's not a bad thing. You want it to be nice and snug so it doesn't come apart just through normal use. If it's so tight that you can't get the dovetail in there, then you might take a small file and just very lightly sand out or scratch out the opening a little bit, and then try again. But you want it to be nice and snug. So if it gets nice and snug, one of the nice things to do is take a pair of pliers, set at its largest opening, that's the smallest opening, this is larger, set it at its largest opening, and just use that to squeeze the two parts together. And we'll do that with pretty much every one of the dovetails, but use the pliers on its largest setting. So now those two rings are ready to go. I can slip them over my fingers and they're ready to go. We just need to assemble the stylus itself. So this stylus is using a 25 millimeter long bolt. It's a metric 5 millimeter diameter bolt, so it's an M5 bolt, and it's 25 millimeters long. We're also using a 15 millimeter coupling nut with it. So when used in combination, a 25 and a 15, the stylus is printed at 30 millimeters long. I'm sorry, 35 millimeters long. So 10 millimeters longer than the bolt. If I were using an 8 millimeter coupler, it would be 5 millimeters longer than the bolt. So we'll just take the coupler and we'll just squeeze it in here. Try and get the flat sides lined up with the flat sides of the stylus. Then we'll take our conductive tip, our capacitive tip, and we'll just tighten it in there. You can take pliers and tighten it down nice and snug. And then we're going to put the bolt in the other end. Turn it in just a little bit, not a lot. And then we'll slip it onto the stylus ring here, and I may actually have to bring it out a little bit to get it over and into the recess. I may just take it all the way out into the recess for the head. So that little recess in there keeps the head from spinning, keeps the bolt from spinning. Now I put the whole thing in there. I guess I'll get a finger in there to hold it in place, and we'll just tighten it up. Gets nice and snug. We'll give it one more turn. Now we're done. So now I've got a bolt and nut style stylus here. Goes just on my fingers like this, and I write with it. In a minute we'll look at both these styluses being used with a tablet. Now we'll take a look at a conductive stylus. Conductive in that it has conductive filament in the center here. That black layer is the conductive filament. This is the stylus ring that I sized for my fingers and printed with it. It also has the conductive filament in the center, and then just some attractive colors on the outside. I'm going to use 2 finger rings on either side of the stylus ring. So they'll mount one into one slot and one into the other slot. So it'll kind of lay like this. I think I'm actually going to have the yellow up. And I have 2 different size rings here. It's going to go on this finger, and this finger, and come directly out from the middle finger. So the 2 outer rings will go here. And you'll note that I didn't use any conductive filament when I printed these, because these don't need to be need to have a conductive element to them. It's important that the stylus ring does, because it's carrying the electrical connection from the stylus to the person's hand. But that'll be sufficient just by itself. So there's no requirement that you print these other rings with conductive filament. So we'll just put these guys together as well. That's it. Yeah. So we'll start these on. It's a little bit tight, so I'll bring my pair of pliers in here and squeeze them together. You can play with the colors and how you arrange what's up, what's down. And lastly, put this one in here. That one just went in as it is, didn't need to pressure it in any way. So there's a slot in the end here, because in this case we designed it to allow for this 4mm nut. So we're just going to squeeze that nut in there. It slides in actually pretty easy, in fact out the other side, but that doesn't matter. It's just there to help keep the stylus in place, or the capacitive tip in place. And then we'll put that on, and we'll tighten it down into the nut. So that's ready to go. And it's actually going to go on my fingers like this. It's coming directly out from my fingers. If you wanted to take these apart, say someone's finger size changed, or maybe one of these rings doesn't fit as well as you had hoped, and you don't want to print everything again and assemble a whole nother one, well, you can sometimes slide them apart, get them apart, but you may find that because your printer prints these really tightly, like mine does, you may have some difficulty getting them apart. And then what I recommend you do is take something like this, little punch, and use that, because it's got a flat end to it, use that to pound with a very light hammer right above where the two join together, so that you're sure you're hitting just one of the pieces at a time. And I'm going to do that right now. I have to give myself some space underneath the ring for it to come off. I want to make sure I don't ruin my dovetail joint. There we go. So now it's apart. You can replace it with another better sized ring or a different colored ring, whatever you choose. All right, now we'll take a look at how these work with a tablet. So this is a little graphics program on an iPad, and we'll just use our first stylus, the one that's coming directly off my little finger. Because the iPad is located directly below my hand, I wanted the stylus to come out at this sort of angle. So we'll go ahead and do some art. Very nice. On the other hand, if the iPad was located up here a little bit and coming out from my hand instead, I'm going to use this stylus. So I've got it on my 3 fingers, and I'm going to do my art like this. Turn it this way so you can see it better. So it works just fine, even though I've really only got a small amount of the filament touching the skin of my middle finger. Doesn't take much at all.